I kept thinking the answer was more information, another video, another thread, another framework, another tool, another AI workflow, another explanation from someone who seemed one step ahead, and for a while that feels productive. Because learning looks a lot like progress from the outside. You save things, you highlight things, you organize things, you tell yourself you're getting sharper, you feel responsible, disciplined, serious, but then something strange starts happening. The more you learn, the less clearly you can move. You don't feel ignorant anymore. You feel divided. Part of you wants to act. Another part says you are not ready yet. Part of you sees opportunity everywhere. Another part sees contradiction in everything. So instead of moving, you keep adjusting your understanding. And this is where a lot of people get stuck without realizing it. Not because they are lazy, not because they don't care. Not because they lack ambition. They are stuck because they built a relationship with information that feels useful, but actually keeps replacing direct contact with reality. I know this feeling well. There was a period where I was consuming a lot, producing a lot, testing a lot, and still feeling like nothing was settling into something solid. Every day I had input. Every day I had ideas. Every day I had some new angle about AI, content, business, leverage, systems, distribution. And yet under all of that movement, there was a quiet instability, because none of it was reducing confusion. It was just giving confusion more sophisticated language. That was the part I didn't understand at first. I thought confusion meant I had not learned enough, but in many cases, confusion is what happens when learning becomes disconnected from a real person, a real problem, and a real decision. You can keep learning forever inside that loop. You can become extremely articulate about things you still cannot use. You can explain systems you have never actually grounded. You can produce content about growth while not being able to identify one person you can genuinely help. And platforms make this easier to hide, because platforms reward visible activity, not necessarily real clarity. If you post consistently, it looks like momentum. If you stay informed, it looks like seriousness. If you speak in the language of strategy, it looks like depth. But a lot of this can happen without any real compounding. Because attention on platforms resets constantly. What performs today disappears tomorrow. What took hours gets buried in minutes. What felt meaningful gets absorbed into a feed that keeps moving whether your work mattered or not. That doesn't mean platforms are useless. It just means they are not where value is stored. And when you don't understand that, you start trying to build certainty inside systems designed to keep everything in motion. That creates a very specific kind of exhaustion. You keep publishing, but nothing feels like it stays. You keep learning, but nothing feels like it resolves. You keep thinking, but nothing becomes simpler. This is why some people become more confused as they become more informed, because they are collecting perspectives in an environment that constantly interrupts integration. There is no natural end point, no stable floor. No moment where the platform tells you, yes, this understanding is now rooted in reality. The platform just gives you more to react to, more opinions, more tactics, more examples, more urgency. More proof that everyone else is moving. So naturally, you start asking the wrong question. You ask, how do I grow? How do I optimize? How do I get more reach? How do I stay relevant? How do I keep up with AI? How do I post in the right way? Those questions sound smart, but they often arrive too early, because before growth there is usefulness. Before reach there is relevance to one human being. Before scale there is contact. Before better systems, there is direct signal. The shift that changed things for me was smaller than I expected. I stopped asking what content I should make next, and I started asking who specifically is this actually for, not audience in the abstract, not niche in a branding sense, not demographic categories, a person, someone who is overwhelmed, someone who is trying hard and not seeing return, someone who is learning constantly but still feels unstable, someone who says, "I'm doing everything, but nothing works." That kind of specificity changes the quality of your thinking, because once a real person enters the frame, a lot of complexity starts falling away. You no longer need to say everything. You no longer need to cover every angle. You no longer need to prove how much you know. You only need to become useful. And usefulness has a simplifying effect. It forces you to separate what is interesting from what is necessary, what sounds intelligent from what helps, what performs publicly from what works privately. This is where AI started becoming more valuable to me, not as a way to generate more noise, but as a way to reduce friction around execution after the human problem became clear. I think this is where a lot of people invert the order. They start with tools, then they build workflows, then they generate content, then they chase attention, then they wonder why none of it feels stable. But if you begin with a real person and a real problem, AI becomes different. It helps you simplify, it helps you structure, it helps you test language, it helps you shorten feedback loops. It helps you turn a vague instinct into something repeatable. That is a completely different use of technology. Now AI is not replacing thought, it is supporting clarity, and clarity changes execution. Because once the problem is real and the person is real, execution becomes less emotional. You do not need to reinvent yourself every day. You do not need to wait for inspiration. You do not need to keep proving your intelligence through complexity. You just need to do simple things repeatedly and improve them through feedback. This is the part that sounds almost too basic, which is probably why people skip it. Simplify, repeat, iterate. But iteration only works when something touches reality. If you are only posting into the void and measuring platform behavior, you are not always receiving useful signal. Sometimes you are just measuring formatting, timing, trend alignment, or temporary attention bias. Useful feedback often comes from closer range: a reply, a conversation, a message. A question someone asks after engaging with your work. A moment where someone says, "This is exactly what I was struggling to explain." That is signal. That tells you where your words connected to an actual internal problem. And once you get enough of that kind of signal, your work starts changing. Not because you found the perfect strategy, but because reality is now shaping your iteration. This is what I think many solopreneurs are missing when they feel trapped between learning and doing. They think they need a better plan. Sometimes what they really need is less abstraction, less distance from people, less dependence on platform metrics as proof, less obsession with appearing informed, more direct contact, more grounded usefulness, more repetition around something small but real. Because when you stay close to real people, clarity arrives differently. It does not arrive as a grand vision. It arrives as reduction. You start noticing what matters and what does not. You start seeing which problems repeat. You start understanding which part of your thinking is transferable. You start recognizing what people actually trust you for. And from there, strategy gets simpler. Not easier necessarily, but cleaner. You are no longer trying to build on top of confusion. You are reducing confusion at the source. Then execution becomes mechanical in the best sense. You create, you share, you observe, you adjust, you help, you refine, you repeat. That loop sounds unimpressive from the outside, but over time, that is where compounding comes from. Not from hoping content will stack forever inside a platform. Not from assuming code, posts, or output automatically become assets just because they exist online. A lot of digital work disappears. A lot of effort gets absorbed into systems designed to reset attention by default. So if you rely only on platforms as the place where value lives, confusion is almost inevitable. Because you are trying to build something lasting in an environment designed around interruption. This is why I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Real compounding starts when you stop creating for systems and start working directly with real people. Not audiences, not metrics. real individuals with real problems. That is where clarity begins. That is where simplification becomes possible. That is where AI becomes useful in the right way, as a tool for reducing complexity rather than multiplying it. And that is where execution becomes sustainable, because you are no longer driven only by pressure or performance. You are driven by signal. Then the loop becomes visible. Direct human connection leads to simplification. Simplification makes strategy clearer. AI helps reduce friction in execution. Execution becomes repeatable. Repetition creates iteration. Iteration produces feedback. Feedback sharpens clarity. Clarity improves value. Improved value expands reach. Expanded reach creates results. And if you stay in that loop long enough, compounding appears as a consequence, not as a hack, not as a content trick, not as a promise from a platform. Just as the natural result of helping real people consistently, simplifying what matters, and building from signal instead of noise. I learned more, but somehow became more confused.